about the German air menace. In order that the government should have an opportunity of consulting their expert advisers, I supplied the Lord President with a précis in advance, and upon this he made a series of strong declarations. I must read these to the House. It is not the case that Germany is rapidly approaching equality with us. Her real strength is not 50% of our strength in Europe today. As for the position this time next year, that is November of this year, so far from the German military air force being at least as strong as, and probably stronger than our own, we estimate that we shall still have in Europe alone a margin of nearly 50%. It is quite true that my right honourable friend in that second statement said, provided that there is no acceleration in Germany. But it is very difficult to know what is acceleration when the original speed at which the German Air Force was constructed is not known, and when the final limit at which they are aiming is known. Then came this declaration, the most important that we have had. The Prime Minister has repeated it today. His Majesty's government are determined in no conditions to accept any position of inferiority with regard to what air force may be raised in Germany in the future. Here we have an assertion that the government, with all their sources of information, were convinced that they had or would continue to have for many months a large air superiority over Germany, and that in no case would they fail to maintain what has been called air parity with Germany. These assurances were accepted. Mr. Lloyd George spoke in that debate. I remember his speech well. He declared himself completely reassured. He declared himself in agreement with the principle that we should maintain our parity, and said that he was completely reassured by the fact that we still had this air superiority and that the government intended to maintain it unbroken in the future. The leader of the Liberal Party accepted it, and he too rapidly decided in his own mind that the government statement was right and that mine was wrong. That was in November. Only 6 weeks ago, the Under-Secretary of State for Air was put up to say that at that date, in March 1935, that is to say last March, we had a substantial superiority over Germany, and that in November of this year we should still have superiority. Only 6 weeks have passed since then, and surely we are entitled to ask what has happened to bring about the extraordinary change in the whole color and configuration of the landscape. We are told that Herr Hitler made a statement to the Foreign Secretary at Berlin in the conversations, which it now seems were most fortunately undertaken. Otherwise, I suppose we should never have known. We have not always been accustomed to depend for our information upon statements, however frank and friendly, that may be made by rulers of other states. All these statements that were made by the Lord President, and later on behalf of the government, and under instructions from the government by the Under-Secretary for Air, are admitted to be untrue. I do not say that they were made in bad faith, but they were utterly wrong. They were the reverse of the truth, and more than the reverse of the truth, certainly. If the government statement was that we should be 50% stronger than Germany at a certain date, and we find that they are 50% stronger than we are, it was the reverse of the truth, and far worse than that. Is there a member of the government who will get up now and say that in November next we shall still have a 50% superiority, or that we have a superiority today? No, sir. The whole of these assertions, made in the most sweeping manner and on the highest authority, are now admitted to be entirely wrong. We have had a confession from the Prime Minister today that the then estimates have been found to be below what is now understood to be the truth. There is a second unpleasant chapter on this subject, of which I will merely indicate the title and the contents. The German military machines have all been produced within the last 2.5 years. Therefore, they are of the latest design. An honourable gentleman has just placed in my hands a telegram which has arrived and been published in one of the evening newspapers, in which General Goering says, "We have no old machines. Our planes are the most up-to-date in existence." Many of our designs, on the other hand, are 7 or 8 years old, the average of our machines. These facts are perfectly well known. There is nothing in them that is not known, or I would not say it. Is certainly double the age of the designs which have been created in Germany. It cannot be disputed that both in numbers and in quality, Germany has already obtained a marked superiority over our home defense air force. But it is the third chapter of this story which is the most grievous. The rate and volume which the output of German military airplanes has attained is many times superior to our own. The Undersecretary told us 6 weeks ago that the additions that would be made to our first-line air strength, which was then thought sufficient, would be 151. There is reason to believe, as I said on that occasion, that the comparable German output of military machines is between at least 100 and 150 per month. Many people would put it much higher. The German air industry is therefore turning out military machines at perhaps 10 times the rate at which ours are turned out, and those machines are being formed into squadrons for which long-trained, ardent personnel are already assembled, and for which an ample number of aerodromes are already prepared. Therefore, at the end of this year, when we were to have a 50% superiority over Germany, they will be at least between 3 and 4 times as strong as we are. Behind all this rapid peacetime production lies the industry of Germany, fully organized for war manufacture and steadily tending in its character to the condition of war manufacture. This can be drawn upon at any time, gradually, and to any extent which they choose. Where, then, is this pledge of air parity, and that we should not accept any inferiority to whatever the German Air Force might be? The Prime Minister said today that the Lord President's declaration stands. It stands only as a declaration. The facts do not support the assertion. It is absolutely certain that we have lost air parity already, both in the number of machines and in their quality. It is certain that at the end of this year we shall be far worse off relatively than we are now. Our home defense force will be, for a long period ahead, a rapidly diminishing fraction of the German Air Force. It may reasonably be urged that the units of the German Air Force, having been prepared in conditions of secrecy, have not at the present time acquired the efficiency of our squadrons in air tactics and in formation flying. It is very dangerous to underrate German efficiency in any military matter. All my experience has taught me to think that any such supposition would be most imprudent. Anyhow, now that the Germans are openly marshalling and exercising their squadrons and forming them with great rapidity, we may take it that 6 months of this summer and autumn will amply give them the combined training which they require, having regard to the long, careful individual preparations which have been made. Therefore, any superiority which we may at this moment possess in personnel and in formation flying and in air maneuvering is a wasting asset, and will be gone by the end of autumn, having regard to the enormously increased German air strength and the superiority of their machines. The Prime Minister, in his article in the newsletter, used the word ambush. The word must have sprung from the anxieties of his heart, for it is an ambush into which, in spite of every warning, we have fallen. I have stated the position in general terms, and I have tried to state it not only moderately, but quite frigidly. Here I pause to ask the committee to consider what these facts mean and what their consequences impose. I confess that words fail me. In the year 1708, Mr. Secretary St. John, by a calculated ministerial indiscretion, revealed to the House the fact that the Battle of Almanza had been lost in the previous summer because only 8,000 British troops were actually in Spain out of the 29,000 that had been voted by the House of Commons for this service. When a month later this revelation was confirmed by the government, it is recorded that the House sat in silence for half an hour, no member caring to speak or wishing to make a comment upon so staggering an announcement. And yet how incomparably small that event was to what we now have to face. That was merely a frustration of policy. Nothing that could happen to Spain in that war could possibly have contained in it any form of danger which was potentially mortal. But what is our position today? For many months, perhaps for several years, most critical for the peace of Europe, we are inexorably condemned to be in a position of frightful weakness. If Germany were the only power with which we were concerned, if we stood alone, compared with Germany, and if there were no other great countries in Europe who shared our anxieties and dangers and our point of view,